full screen presentation on, then somehow it goes wrong with Zoom. Hi, Christoph. So what I'm going to show you very quickly is how the CHET toolkit works. You already saw it the first day probably from the platform. So I'm not going to deep dive into how the toolkit works on the platform. I'll just briefly show it. But what I wanted to explain to you is more or less how the toolkit works and how it's been set up. So after, and I'm seeing here there's a error on the website. Techniques is not written right, but anyway. After careful consideration of loads of creativity techniques, we ended up selecting 31 techniques for you, which the idea is that you can just pick and match them to whatever needs you have. There's no particular need to go through the full courses. The way it's done, it allows you to say, I want creativity technique for specific purposes. Now, what we've done is we've selected and classified them according to certain types. So within CHET, we identified 4 types of creativity techniques. One is for communication and motivation. The other is for critical and lateral thinking. The other is for problem solving. And the last one is assessment and evaluation. The last one, it doesn't have the name creativity techniques because it's more a creative way of assessing and evaluating the results and the skills attainment and acquirement by your students. But still, if you want to apply creativity techniques in your classroom and with your students, you can't go back to the traditional exam type things. And you need to find also creative ways to assess them, because it's not about filling in quizzes and just the right answers to a question anymore. So this is the reason why we included the 4th type of techniques. Now, all the techniques have been classified according to these 4. Of course, some creativity techniques that we've selected cover more than one area. So there are creativity techniques which, for example, are related to motivation, lateral thinking, and problem solving, for instance. So you can search on this basis of this classification. We also identified other classification criteria, apart from the 4 which we already mentioned. We have the size of the group, depending on the technique used. Some techniques are more appropriate for small groups or individual work. Others work better with larger groups, and some work better with all sizes of groups, depending on how you adapt the technique and its use. So in those cases where the technique highlights and indicates that you can have more than one type of group or one size of group, there will also be tips and tricks to adapt it to either smaller or larger groups. The other one we use is digital and online and face-to-face. There are creativity techniques which could be done also digitally online, and others which require face-to-face interaction. So, and this is especially done because also of the pandemic, where it's not always possible to have the face-to-face activity. So it allows you also to say, I want to search creativity techniques which are available or which are appropriate to do online with my students. We also identify the duration, which is not a condition. It's, let's say, a recommendation based upon the experiences we had with the different techniques in which we identify the most appropriate duration. Of course, you can adapt it yourself, but we thought that bearing in mind the duration of classes and the trainings you do, that dividing between very short and quick exercises and activities to those that take more than 2 hours and can even stretch over days, as the experience which I think it was Lina or Aglia who presented the activities they do, and that stretched over more than 1 day. So some creativity techniques can be used in a very quick and short way, but also can be extended longer in those cases where it's indicated that they can cover several durations. time limits. There are some tips and tricks there as well about how to adapt it for a specific situation. Then, of course, we have something which needs to be done in a group and some activities which can be done individually. It's clear that creativity can be done individually, but there are quite some activities, as some of the techniques like the brainwriting we've included, that actually require the participation of several persons. And this is also important, bearing in mind that whatever you have the availability or you prefer to do a group activity or individual activity. Also, of course, we have activities which are classroom-based or collaborative team settings or self-work by students. So either you have all the students in a classroom and you do it as an activity, but you can also create collaborative teams between your students who can then work in groups within the classroom or outside the normal lecture period on the topics. And of course, you have also techniques which allow self-work by the students. Again, here, many techniques allow for different situations depending on how you adapt them a bit to the specific situation you're seeing. Of course, we also have techniques which are better placed for theory-based classroom activities, practice-based activities, or those which are undetermined. So those for which we have not been able to say, well, they're better for theory-based or practice-based. So we said, instead of clicking on both options, we made it undetermined. And the last one is more related to what kind of materials you need in the classroom. So a whiteboard or similar paper, colored pencils, market, the sticky notes, and other. Of course, this list could have been much longer, but let's say that the first four are the ones most used in creativity activities within a classroom. So that's why we kept them. Of course, as you can see it, you say, okay, whiteboards or sticky notes, we can't do that online. Well, yes, you can, because nowadays there's loads of applications that allow you to do these kind of creativity exercises also online. So when it says sticky notes and whiteboard are similar, it can also apply to those activities and techniques which we have online. And then, of course, and I've left this for the last, this is very much related to what Max, Patricia, and Marianne already explained about the divergent and convergent phase of the different activities. We also indicate for the particular technique in which phase, to which phase it's related. And of course, some are related to several phases. But the logic has it that one is related to the inspiration in the diversion phase, normally is not related to the conversion phase of evaluation. However, the combinations within divergent and convergent are quite common across our techniques. So this is, of course, there are some techniques which are on the turning points, which you can see by the screen. Unfortunately, the letters here are not that good to be seen probably on the screen, but if you have the presentation, you will have it on the LTTA folder. You can access that. So these are in a very, very quick way, the classifications we have done. Overall, there are about, and now I have to switch screens to another one, which is open and Excel. Here we go. So what we've done when we started working is that we've identified various of the techniques. You see some of them reflected here. I've done this exercise so that you can see those which are related to communication and innovation, motivation, sorry. And you can see that several of them are also related to the other types. So for example, storytelling, which is stories that are told for purposes mainly to inspire, change, convince, or share knowledge. We've classified that as a technique for communication and motivation. Of course, it can help in critical analytical thinking, it can help in problem solving, but it's not the technique which is mainly related to it. So it doesn't mean that this technique cannot be adapted and used by yourself in other circumstances for other reasons, but this is how we've developed the content of that particular technique with a focus on communication and motivation. Now you see the second one is brainwriting, which is brainstorming, but uses writing rather than talking. And you see that this one is particularly interesting for all. So in this sense, you can see that we've played around and tried to get techniques which are only related to one of the items or types, and various which are related to all the types. So this allows you to scan through them and see which ones are most appropriate. You see that most of them are related to one, two, or even more types of techniques. So this is in a very, very quick nutshell what we've been doing. So now I wanted to go, yeah, that's digital for you. Okay, so you should now see the website of CHET.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so if you go into the section which says all the creativity courses, it's what I said before. You can either just scroll through all of them. You can see them, you have the images, you can go into details, where you can see the details, when it was last updated, a description. You can see again here the duration of the technique, so the classifications. Here you can see it's actually the storyboard technique can be used both face-to-face and online. It's for a group. It belongs to the category communication and motivation, the size of the group, type of class, and which phase it is. Now, if you look into the techniques themselves, all follow the same structure. So we first say, what is this technique about? Short introduction. A short thing about the background, where does it come from? So a little bit of history for you. And then for why is it used? So this particular purpose is focused on engineering teaching. So why can it be used in engineering teaching? And then how to implement it, which are steps, tricks and tips on how to do it, the materials you need. And then we have for all of them resources. So we have some YouTube videos, we have some interesting links for you, which you can go to, and we have the references if you really want to go into the research that is behind this particular technique. We didn't put links up to the references because they're not always online, but you still have the reference and you can search yourself, especially if you're a university teacher. Normally you have access to these kind of official journals more easily. So this is in a nutshell on what it is. So you either scroll through the technique, but as you can see here on the left-hand side, you can say, I want the following category. So I now want the creativity technique for problem solving. I want a turning point one. I have a group, which is its group. And the size of my group is up to 15. And I wanted either self-work or classroom setting, a collaborative team. Well, duration anywhere between. This, for example, I want to see it both for both digital and online, and a type of class, practice-based. And you can then search if there's a technique that fits. Oh, something wrong has happened. Normally, officially what should happen is that I should be able to search the technique. And yesterday it worked, really funny. So something is going wrong here with the search option. So we'll check it out with the technical team. But yesterday I did my exercises and I prepared and it worked. So this is always Murphy style. Whenever you need it, it doesn't work. Let's see if I only take one. If it's because something in the search option doesn't work. But I mean, the idea is that you can either scan through whatever you want, but you can also search for a particular type of creativity technique. And I don't know if there's any questions, but I'm only 1 minute over my time. So I recovered 4 minutes for you for the rest of the group. The idea is that we have now some questions, and then we have presentations of some of the particular techniques with people that have used it in real life. So I would suggest if you have questions about somebody using a specific technique, you wait until we finish those presentations, because there might be that the technique you had in mind is going to be presented by our, let's say, experienced and empirical experts who have actually used that particular tool. So if there's any questions generically about the techniques, I would suggest to do that now. And if it's about a particular technique, leave that for after the second part of the session. So any questions? No questions. I love it when there's no questions. So then, according to the program, it's over to our experienced experts. And I don't know, from the 3 experienced experts we have, who want to take the floor first.